The migrant channel crossings have been an issue for at least a few years now, but as much as they come to the public consciousness, nothing ever seems to be done about it. The reason for that is essentially this is one big racket with multiple different dimensions, and in this video I want to explore how it works from the top, how it works on the ground, and how all of this fits into a broader globalist agenda. So let's start at the top with the United Nations. On your screen is a fella called Mohammed Safa. He's an unelected diplomat who essentially works as a representative for the United Nations arena for economic and social development, and his job is to essentially push for quote-unquote human rights for migrants. Essentially, there are hundreds of vague figures like this at the UN that agitate for globalist interests. Of course, this is all done under the banner of human rights to win over the naive and the leftists. However, if you dare disagree with them, you'll immediately be put in the evil person camp. Here's Mohammed on Twitter stating in reference to the death of a 7-year-old girl who was taken across the channel on a dinghy by her father: "If you think fertilized eggs are people, but parents who've crossed the oceans with their kids aren't, stop pretending your concerns are religious." That this fella is a representative at the United Nations is truly unbelievable. This level of political discourse is what you expect from a wannabe edgy 14-year-old who's just discovered Noam Chomsky. Nobody believes that the migrants trying to cross the channel aren't people. This is a completely false dichotomy leftists always set up to try and make them sound moral and you evil. Secondly, that he has to make his point via a dig at Christians and Christianity shows us once again how the adherents of the religion of peace feel about tolerance and diversity deep down. Yet what this shows us is that organisations like the UN and the WEF are full of left-wing agitators who push for policies under the banner of human rights to accept migrants endlessly. Yet once they've got their policies codified in international law, do you think they pay any attention to stories like this? How a 16-year-old Iraqi girl was choked to death while being raped in front of her mother on a sinking migrant boat recently? What about the massive uptick in sexual assaults across Europe? What about the terror attacks? What about people feeling like their own cultures and societies are being eroded? Well, none of those things come under the banner of human rights, and if you notice any of them, you're just an evil, racist bigot. We have to remember, guys, that as Labour MP Naz Shah pointed out, those girls that were groomed all across the north of England should shut their mouths for the good of diversity. Now, this all stems from an ideology which is the first major dimension of how the migrant crossings continue. Essentially, it's a grouping of globalists, leftists, and members of the religion of peace that join together to push their agenda through under the umbrella of supposed human rights, tolerance, and diversity. Now, regarding the story that Mohammed Rafa was talking to at the beginning, I actually covered that on this channel when it first came out, and after reading deeply into it, what I found was that basically it's the girl's father that's at fault here, no one else. As much as the BBC tried to make out the father didn't have a choice, he ultimately did have lots of choices. He'd only ever been in 2 European countries, and he was having kids when his living situation was uncertain anyway. He has to take personal responsibility for himself and the safety of his family. This little girl's death, though tragic, is not the fault of the British people. If we're expected to have endless compassion to every sad story in the world, we'd have no country within a year or two. There simply needs to be justice combined with compassion for any functioning modern state. Yet this story gets even weirder when you look at a piece the BBC did on it recently.
The BBC has tracked down and confronted a people smuggler who organised a channel crossing in which a 7-year-old girl died.
So we're supposed to believe that these people smugglers, who no authorities can seemingly catch, the BBC has just managed to find out where they are and interview them. This tells us something else very important about the migrant crossings. There is clearly a lot of corruption going on with the authorities. I'd imagine these people smugglers are paying people off both in France and the UK. And this leads us to the final dimension as to why the powers that be are happy to keep the migrant crossings going. This is because it keeps the public focus on illegal immigration. As much as woke-lovey idiots like Banksy will do their artworks for Glastonbury trying to virtue signal about how horrible the crossings are, fundamentally this is very good for the establishment. This is why Rishi Sunak is doing election ads saying he's going to stop illegal migrants, though he hasn't done anything for the last few years, because he wants you to focus on illegal migration so you ignore the elephant in the room, which is legal migration. Remember last year, Rishi Sunak saw over 1 million people come to the UK, many of them hostile to us and our way of life, with zero desire to integrate. This is why I keep saying on this channel we must be aware of the broad international context, because simple elections aren't going to vote away this problem. Yes, voting for reform would be a start, but in the long run we need a trans-European initiative which states to the people of Davos and New York and all the woke ideologues too, we want control of Europe ourselves and control of our own destiny into the future. Anyhow, I hope you got something from the video today. Do let me know your thoughts down below and do consider subscribing to the channel.